would really like to have questions at the end. Trying to remember if you have any questions about anything. But I'm going to go ahead and start the presentation on Juneteenth. Okay. And let me get my slides here. So let me put my glasses on. Okay. So I'm Claudette Bard, and I've been a member of the Pascal Senior Center since about 2019. I belong to a genealogy group called the Baltimore Afro-American Historical and Genealogical Society. I'm also with the Black Writers Guild of America. I love history and I love finding my roots. So if you could hold your questions until the end of the presentation, I'll try best to answer them. What we will discuss today, so what is Juneteenth? That's the first discussion. And the second one is my ancestral connection to the holiday. I have kind of a convoluted way of explaining my connection to Juneteenth, and it's interesting. So what is Juneteenth? Juneteenth is a holiday commemorating the end of slavery in the United States. The word Juneteenth is a combination of June and 19th. It is now a federal holiday celebrated on June the 19th, yesterday, and has been since 2021 when the Juneteenth National Independence Act was signed by President Joe Biden. However, in many parts of the country, and especially in Texas, years before the holiday became a reality, it had been celebrated as Emancipation Day or Freedom Day. Texas, in my research, I found that it was celebrated a lot in Texas. Loudoun County, Virginia, where I've done a lot of my genealogical research, they celebrated it as Emancipation Day, probably maybe up to the 1920s, and it kind of dropped off. So the Juneteenth holiday and the Emancipation Proclamation have a connection. Here's how. The Emancipation Proclamation was enacted on January 1st, 1863, by President Abraham Lincoln.
Oh, right there. You can sit right there.
Right there. Now, I remember learning in school that the Emancipation Proclamation freed all the slaves. So what gives? I thought that was the end of slavery. How many of you are familiar with the term watch night? I mean, the term watch night, yes. It is a day of poetry and song, a new song. These cloudless skies, this balmy air, this brilliant sunshine are in harmony with the glorious morning of liberty about to dawn upon us. And this is a quote by Frederick Douglass on December 31st, 1862. It has Watch Night has its origins in the Emancipation Proclamation. On December 31st, enslaved and free African Americans gathered in churches and homes to ring in the new year and await the news of the Emancipation Proclamation to take effect. The decree would take effect on January 1st, 1863. The occasion known as Watch Night, or Freedom's Eve, marked the moment when African Americans across the country watched and waited for the news of freedom. Today, Watch Night is still celebrated as an annual New Year's tradition. It stands for Reflections of Faith, Freedom, and is a celebration of community and strength. Now, the states in red are the ones that the Emancipation Proclamation was enforced. Generally speaking, they were the southern states that were in rebellion or the states under Confederate control. The states pictured in blue were slave-holding states, and they were not covered by the Emancipation Proclamation. The area in blue in Louisiana is under Union control. Did you notice that Maryland and Delaware are included in the blue states? Those enslaved in Maryland were freed on November the 1st, 1864. Delaware didn't end slavery until December 1865 with the ratification of the 13th Amendment. So Maryland was what they call a border state. It was not under, and it was a slave state until November 1st, 1864, when the Constitution of Maryland had to be changed so that enslaved people were free. And Delaware waited till later on. Now you notice I've got this emphasis on Texas. That's just another notable date. The end of the Civil War. On April the 9th, General Robert E. Lee surrendered his Confederate troops to Union General Ulysses S. Grant at Appomattox Courthouse in Virginia. This marked the beginning of the end of the Civil War, the American Civil War. In August of 1866, President Andrew Johnson declared a formal end to the conflict. This was just, again, another notable date, the ending of the Civil War in 1865. The news of the Emancipation Proclamation did not reach Texas when it was enacted in 1863, even though it was a slave-holding state. There were several reasons. One was the fact that Texas was the most remote of the southern states, and the Union troops were slowly withdrawing because the Civil War was winding down. Additionally, many planters had migrated to Texas to escape the war, and many brought slaves with them. Texas eventually had 250,000 enslaved people. Now you would think they would have email, they have text messages, some other way to that it's 2.5 year period, but of course that wasn't shall be thenceforward and forever free. On the morning of June the 19th, 1865, Major General Gordon Granger, a Union general, landed in Galveston Bay, Texas, 2.5 years after the Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation. He was joined by 2,000 Union Army troops. General Granger read General Order Number 3, which proclaimed that all enslaved people were now free. Texas was the last bastion for slavery during the final days of the Civil War. And this is why this is such an important topic. I don't know if you've noticed, there's a Juneteenth flag, and this is it. This is the flag of Juneteenth. It was designed by Ben Haight, an activist and founder of the National Juneteenth Celebration Foundation. The meaning of the flag is a single star in it, which represents the Lone Star of Texas. The red, white, blue, of course, is the American flag. And there's a curve. This curve represents a new horizon inspired by Nova. It represents the new beginning for African Americans. So that's the part explaining with the Juneteenth holiday. I will now talk about my ancestral connection to Juneteenth. This is the gravestone of Private Samuel B. Timbers. The inscription reads, Samuel B. Timbers, Company H, 29 USCI, which is the United States Colored Infantry. He is buried in the Mount Sinai Cemetery in Loversville, Virginia, in Loudoun County. this is my connection to private timbers. And it's a little convoluted, but I'm gonna explain my connection, and it's a little unfinished because there's a lot of Samuel Timbers. When I did research on this family here, my family, there are a lot of Samuel Timbers, so I have to weed those out. But this is a kind of a family tree. My mother is Carolyn Waters Lewis. My grandmother is Percy Waters Brown. Her father is Harry Garfield Waters, born around 1881. And you go on up to this highlighted, which is Hannah Timbers Waters, my grandmother, I'm sorry. And above that is her mother, my great-grandmother, which is Margaret Nelson Timbers. Now, you notice that Margaret Nelson Timbers had 11 children. 11 children. And I've only found 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. My great-great-grandmother and her sisters and brothers, their siblings. So, Private Timbers, the gravestone that I just showed you, he is a descendant of one of them kids. One of them kids. I have not found exactly, because there's a lot of Samuel Timbers in the census. So, but I'm claiming him. I'm claiming him. So, but anyway. So this is the gravestone again. We'll tell you a little bit about Samuel Timbers. He was born in Lovettsville, Virginia, Loudoun County, about 1845, and he was born a free black. There were free black people of color in Virginia and really every state. When the Emancipation Proclamation was enacted, African American men could enlist in the armed services on the Union side. There was like 180,000 of them, I believe. I'm going to show you another slide in a minute. Samuel Timbers was enlisted in October of 1864 in Baltimore, Maryland. He served in Company H, 29th Regiment of the U.S. Colored Infantry. I am a co-founder of the Family and Friends of the Mount Sinai Cemetery, which is in Lovettsville, Virginia, and we have been trying to restore the cemetery for several years. One of the other founders did more research and discovered Private Timbers' unit was most likely in both Appomattox Courthouse, where the surrender took place, during Lee's surrender, and was shipped. And then his unit was shipped to Galveston, Texas, where General Granger was, and he read the proclamation. And which informed African Americans were free. I call Private Timbers the Forrest Gump of the Civil War. That's my little name for him, because he was at different historical locations. You know, we don't know if he was really there, but his unit was there. We know that. So, but that's a little bit about my ancestor, Private Samuel Timbers. This is the African American Civil War Museum. Has anybody ever been to this museum? It's in D.C. You bet. Yes. Yeah. It's pretty neat. African American Civil War Museum is located in 1925 Vermont Avenue. I'm going to tell you the address. Northwest Washington. Through a collection of artifacts, stories, and memorabilia, it honors those African American troops who fought, sacrificed, and died during the American Civil War. They helped fight slavery and aided in reuniting the country. Those names are engraved on the wall of the courtyard across the street from the museum, very much like the Vietnam Veterans Memorial in D.C., Washington, D.C. The difference between those two memorials is that this wall has all the veterans, all the African American veterans that served in the American Civil War. Of course, the Vietnam Veterans Memorial only has veterans that were deceased, and I think there are missing in action. I think are listed on that granite wall in D.C. As you can see, I found Samuel Timbers' name. There it is. Took a picture, and he's there. You have to know if you're looking for a particular person, you have to know the unit and the regiment they were in order to find. But it was, once I knew that, I went right to it. It was very easy to find. But it's, this is the wall here. You can see there's many, many names. This is the statue in front of the wall. That's the entrance of the museum. It's pretty impressive. It really is. And some of my resources, Wikipedia, of course. The National Museum of African American History and Culture in Washington, D.C., and the African American Civil War Museum website in D.C. as well. The end. Anybody have any questions? And thank you very much for having me.